I recently made a video talking about how big Stellar, aka XLM, is going to be in this market. I still believe that when we look at how crypto is evolving, some of these utility-based assets like XLM are going to be huge pillars in this new system that's becoming a reality. And although, yes, it can take some time, I still think that we are going to have major moves within the market initially before that officially happens. But XLM is probably one of the most overlooked and most undervalued assets in this space. Yes, there's multiple dark horses in this market, but XLM is one that just simply does not get enough love and attention considering the scale of the network already. So, with that in mind, let's talk about a few things happening around XLM. And I know that a lot of you are going to say, well, Nick, what about the price action? Yes, the market right now is a little bit rough. I have been watching XLM closely over the last couple weeks. I don't necessarily believe that it's very similar to this time frame back here where we were just kind of chopping, because I have been really looking at where we are at right now. It does feel similar. But it's hard to say if we're going to play out perfectly like this again, because we do have that crazy wick to the downside in August 2024. Here we have that crazy wick down to the downside in February, and then we just have that chop for weeks on end. And right now we are chopping, but the market looks a little bit rough, and it all depends on if Bitcoin is bottomed out or not. And I know that a lot of people in the space hate to hear that, like, oh, why are we talking about Bitcoin when, obviously we're talking about XLM? It's because Bitcoin is the driver. Like, XLM is just simply in the backseat with all of the other altcoins waiting for Bitcoin to decide what it wants to do. But the good thing about XLM, and very similar to XLM, a lot of altcoins right now, is that we are in this like crazy range. And the only thing that we need to be worried about on XLM is if we lose 14.5 cents roughly on the daily view. If we close below those lows going back to February, then yes, we are going to essentially be risk off for a bit of time on XLM, where we really kind of look at like the next key area of interest, and that would be around like 12.5 cents, which was the support that we built back in November of 2024. So that would be a huge discount. It would be a great buy-in opportunity on XLM, but very similar to other altcoins in this market. Like, everyone is always asking me, like, when is the perfect time to buy? Well, the main thing that I'm really looking at with XLM and a lot of altcoins in the market is like, do we think that XLM is going to go back to like 30, 40, 50 plus cents? Then if that's the case, then we just buy whenever we're below that or below key areas of like prior support or demand. So for me personally, like, I'm looking at XLM and I'm looking at where most of the demand is, and it is right around like roughly 11.5 cents, almost 12 cents or so. So pretty much anything within that range where, we're at like roughly, it's a little bit lower. It's the support going back here to like 2021. Anywhere between like 13 cents down to around like roughly 9.5 cents or so, like anything within this range would be a good buy, because this is all profit anyways, even at our current levels. But if we do go down to like the lows going back to 2024, like the fall time frame, then it's just going to be like a buy. It's a no-brainer move. But it's hard to say how low altcoins are going to go, and it's all really determined by what Bitcoin wants to do next. I really wouldn't get too greedy with entries if you are worried about like, the long-term view. If you're more so concerned about like what's happening in the short term, then yeah, you're going to probably want to be a little bit more greedier, just depending on like what happens next here. But I think that the long-term view for XLM is, $1 plus easily. So right now, 15 cents, it's technically going to look like a bargain later in time. But looking at a few things with XLM, and we're going to obviously come back to this view in a moment. The main thing that I'm looking at is just like fundamentals, because I know that right now a lot of the fundamental side of the market doesn't really matter, because everyone's just like, all right, well, it doesn't really matter at all if the price action's not there. But, we are seeing some great growth around some of these networks, regardless of how the market looks. Like, yeah, the market's down. Price action on XLM is down. Like, if we go all the way back to that November 2024 view, like, we're down 76%, which also, by the way, is a good indicator on like why we should be buying anyways, because even back here from the high in 2021, like 76%, yeah, we were down like around like roughly 18.5 cents, but that 18.5 cents turned into profit regardless of where we were. Now, are we going to drop the total 90+%? Well, if we do drop 91%, which I feel like this is just not going to happen, then we would be at like 5.5 cents. That would be the first time that we would be at 5.5 cents since going all the way back to like 2020, which I'm just not seeing that become the reality of where we're at. But like everyone's looking at this and like XLM is down 70+%. So that means that XLM is garbage, right? It's done. It's dead. No. When we look at the facts here and just looking at the execution at network scale, we have this whole article outlines exactly what's been happening for Stellar. So number one, Stellar's infrastructure is showing institutional grade reliability. It processed 22.5 billion total operations, maintained 99.99% uptime, kept average fees around 1/100th of a penny, and reached 10.6 million unique addresses. The tokenized RWA assets crossed $2 billion, which is crazy. And that's up 785 million at the end of 2025, which is roughly a 2.5x growth in one quarter. SDF says that this shows regulated financial products are increasingly being issued and used on public blockchain rails, which it definitely is. Payments also reached an all-time high. Stellar payment volume hit 5.5 billion in quarter one, an all-time high, and up 72% year over year. Payment velocity also rose 75% year over year as well. Major institutions are moving onto or around Stellar. We have US Bank, we have Amundi, Societe Generale, AllUnity. We have so many big players jumping into the Stellar ecosystem. It's crazy to look at this. Like Franklin Templeton was like one of the first ones. And that happened back, like they were in talks with Stellar since back in 2021, officially got announced back in like, I want to say 2023. And since then, it's just been nothing but upward, movement. You also have MoneyGram, Etherfuse, Topnod, like all of these big players. Validator nodes increased 13% since year end, which showed broader network participation. Then also global distribution is expanding corridor by corridor. So SDF highlights that growth across Latin, Europe, and APAC. In Europe, AllUnity's Euro launched on Stellar mainnet in April. Which is a euro-denominated stablecoin volume grew 12x year over year as well. Spiko's EU T-bill product grew from 520 million to 970 million, with most of the growth on Stellar. Then also in APAC, Kananga launched Malaysia's first tokenized money market funds on Stellar, and SDF is working with Market Node in Singapore on institutional settlement infrastructure. So they are expanding rapidly. Stellar's developer ecosystem is growing fast as well. So the Stellar ecosystem grew with 86% year over year growth in total developers and 4,400 plus developers engaged worldwide in quarter one. This is wild. And the best part about this is that more developers can turn Stellar's assets into actual products, wallets, neobanks, treasury tools, FX corridors, payment apps, privacy apps, and even on-chain markets. Then the protocol upgrades focus on privacy, agentic payments, and security. This is all through the three key areas with X-Ray, which is the zero knowledge privacy layer, X402 standard and agentic payments tooling, Yardstick Protocol 26, which introduced CAP 77 quorum freeze, a validator-driven mechanism to help contain compromised assets quickly. So overall, what we are seeing here from Stellar is non-stop upgrades, non-stop growth, non-stop expansion. And this is very, very exciting. And talking about that, tokenization. Guys, tokenization is still growing rapidly. In the beginning of this year, tokenized assets were at roughly $23.3 billion. We're at $33.85 billion. And XLM is still growing rapidly as well. We're up 11, almost 12% in distributed asset value at $1.77 billion. Represent asset value still up to almost $580 million. Stablecoin market cap up 4.16%, nothing too crazy there. But look at the 30-day transfer volume across the board. RWAs up 54%, $250 million. Stablecoin 30-day transfer volume is up 16 and almost 0.5% at $3.16 billion. Yeah, this is incredible to see. The overall growth here, most of it is coming from Spiko, which is with the Euro EU T-bills. That's up a crazy amount, 38% overall with their 9 total assets. And we can see what most of those assets are. We have US T-bills, EU T-bills. We also have cash and carry euro, cash and carry dollar. So yeah, there's a lot of growth happening across the board here for Spiko. Beyond that, Franklin Templeton's still hovering around $650 million, which is great, but there's just a lot of growth here happening around Stellar, which we love to see. And if you wanted to look at just how much volume and growth there is in like the last 7 days or so, we could see that XLM is still number 3 on the list at 121 million. 30-day volume, it's number 4 on the list, 230 million. Looking at the 60-day, this is where Stellar is still kind of dominating, $867 million, number 4 on the list. And then also the 90-day view, Stellar is still number 4, 1.1 billion. So again, there's a lot of growth happening here around a lot of these public chains, which is very, very bullish. And just taking a quick look at the public network as well, we can see that the ledger performance is doing extremely well. We are still seeing a lot of great operations. We're seeing account growth like crazy. Looking at the 1-year time for accounts, by the way, like if we go back to May of 2025, 9.5 million total accounts. We're already at 10.5 million accounts. So 1 million accounts added in 1 year, which is awesome. We can see the DEX trades here, the DEX volume, pretty much everything around XLM. We're seeing everything on the upward push. Now, I will make another video on XLM talking about a lot of the additional updates that we did see, which does include a lot of like the recent moves happening, which again, like there's just a lot to talk about. I don't want to make too long of videos for you guys right now. But looking at XLM, after looking at all of this information, looking at the overall amount of growth, the adoption, the upgrades, I do believe that we are going to start to see a lot more use cases on Stellar. Like looking at the ecosystem around Stellar, it's definitely extremely exciting to look at. Like if you wanted to look into everything happening here, you could see the ecosystem projects and do a little bit more research around these. They do mention the top 3 ones, which are MoneyGram, Circle, and Franklin Templeton, but there's a crazy amount of projects. There's 476 projects in the ecosystem. A lot of it is based around payments and things like that, but if you look at what's really happening here, DeFi is like the main one, which makes a lot of sense considering the fact that like right now we are moving into like an institutional DeFi world with crypto. And that all comes back to tokenized assets, which is why I have been very, very, focused on like what networks are dominating in the tokenization side of things. Stellar still is number 4 on the list for distributed asset value. In terms of like total RWA volume and value around like, the represented and distributed asset value, it's not so much number 4, but still, we are seeing the distributed side, which is like the most important side of RWAs, Stellar still dominating in that side. So that combined with DeFi, I do think that it's going to be a huge game changer for institutional DeFi, and I think that it's going to enable a lot of things around Stellar for institutional DeFi, which is also why you see a lot of these upgrades focused on scaling, on privacy, on security, because they want to make sure that that becomes a reality on Stellar. And that takes me back to the price action. So again, like looking at the space, like could we see a much larger drop in the market? Like are we going to follow the 4-year time frame, and are we going to see like a crazy drop? Well, I more so look at like the time frame structure here. Like if we really are looking at this logically, if we're going back to like the 2020 bottom and we're looking at like where the trend would be, if we're going to follow something like this and we're going to hit this bottom trend line yet again, we would be hitting at about roughly 12 cents. If we wick below it, like similar wicks before, then we would wick down to about roughly 10.5 cents. So I would say like the best area to be buying Stellar at would be roughly around this zone here on the chart, which we're getting very close to anyways. The reason why I said that that would be our bottom essentially is number 1, our price action would wick down to about roughly 83% or so. I don't think that we're going to see the 90% pullbacks like we've seen in previous bear markets. I also think that the lows here for the market are going to be a little bit different as well for like Bitcoin because of ETF adoption and just overall adoption. The main thing for Stellar is that we have yet to break over the resistance on the monthly view at around 54.5 cents. So I'm definitely watching for that to happen in the next phase of growth. But also looking at the time frame structure of when we did bottom out from the high wick to the actual bottom in 2022, it was about 579 days. So far, we have been dropping for about 546 days. So if we do follow that structure, June would be our low for XLM. I do think that June would be the bottom on XLM here. That would take us to these lows. So I would be prepared now to be building a stablecoin bag for a lot of these altcoin assets, because I do think that we are getting closer to that macro bottom area where we can accumulate safely with limited downside potential. And then also when we think about the upside potential from those levels, even if we only hit the demand zone of the trend line, you're still looking at a 347% push to the upside. But like I said, I still think XLM breaks above $1 at least. You got to look at it like this. XLM has 50 billion max supply. 33.5 billion is out there in the market right now. Looking at the market cap right now of XLM, we're sitting at a fully diluted value. I'm going off the fully diluted value, $7.5 billion roughly. You got to think about like, all right, well, is XLM in the same game as like ADA? ADA has $9.2 billion in market cap right now. Looking at some of these other top coins like Solana, Tron, 33, 50 billion, even XRP, like I would mix XRP and XLM into like the same boat here. $87 billion in market cap compared to, $7.57 billion in market cap for Stellar. That's why I think like $1 would be a great start, but I still see like $1.50 plus being a target here for XLM, which would be a 1000% plus push to the upside. And I still think that that's a possibility for XLM. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord on the description below. And with that being said, guys, thanks for watching. Peace out, guys.